the way I liken it is basically air traffic control. It's like you have a certain amount of time to get these scripts written, then you have to shoot them. And it takes longer to write them than it does to shoot them. And so you're running out of time fast. So it's really about like throwing up these planes, get every plane up the runway as fast as you can, even if they're not safe, even if they can barely fly, get them up, put as much gas as you can in them, and in the first one that looks like it's going to crash, get that one landed first. You shoot that one first. You're listening to Screenwriters Need to Hear This with Michael Jamin. Hey everybody, welcome back. This is Michael Jamin. I'm here with Phil Hudson, and today we're talking about what it's like to run a show. Because the word show, so yeah, I talk about this. I'm a showrunner, and a lot of people are like, showrunner? Yeah. Is that a new word? They never even heard that word.
I didn't know about that term until probably 2012 or 13, and I'd been studying screenwriting for like 5 years.
That's so weird. Because, I don't know how old the term is. I certainly knew about it when I was breaking in back in the early 1990s, and I'm certain it was before then. So I don't know how old the term is, but the showrunner is the head writer. The showrunner is usually the executive producer as well. Not always, and the showrunner is often the creator of the show, but not always. So the showrunner is basically, it's a head writer job, but there's also many producer responsibilities that come with it. So you're a writer, but you're also a producer. And so we're going to talk about that today. I'm going to pull back the curtain a little bit on that, what it's like to run a TV show, at least in my experience. And my partner and we've run 3 shows, so I can talk about it, I think with some level of education. We'll find out.
I think this is going to be a very informative episode for people because this is a bit of a nebulous thing. And I think when people think about, at least in my experience, most people I come into contact with when they say they want to write or be a screenwriter, they're talking about feature films. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of sad. Several years ago, it just kind of became very clear that whole world is kind of dying. Mm-hmm. And effectively what we're doing now is we're writing longer versions of films as TV series, right? It's TV writing now.
Yeah. So if you really want, think your career as being a TV writer now. Wrap your head around it, and just dive into it. But so first thing I would like to say is that running a TV show is pretty much just as hard as running a good one. Like it's not like easier just because the show's terrible.
And when you say bad TV, what do you mean? Like, are you talking about like the quality of the writing, or are you talking about just the difficulty of the show?
Oh, I'm talking about the quality of the writing. Okay. Like you may think like, oh, this show's stupid, must be easy to do the job, and it's kind of not. It's you may work a little longer hours on a well-written show because it's harder to make it well-written. But even on a bad show, like the hours can be hard. There's a lot of responsibilities. There's a lot of dynamics that you have to do. It's not like it's easier. Neither job is easy. I'd say that. So,
got it.
And then some things that I learned as a showrunner that I really quite didn't expect, because I'd been working as a TV writer my whole career for like first half of my career or more. I was just a staff writer, one of the writing staff. And then you always think that if you were the boss, if you were the showrunner, you would do it better. Like every writer thinks they could do it better than the boss. And then you become the boss and you're like, ugh, now I realize I shouldn't have, be careful what I wish for, because it's a hard job. And you're more sympathetic to those people now. But there's certainly even things that surprised me, like even the crew dynamics. Like first you think you're on a show, hey, we're all on the same team, right? We're going to make a show together. We're all a family. That's not really the case. Like everyone has different jobs on the show. And often these jobs are at odds with each other. One of the first places I noticed is that the AD, the assistant director, and the DP, the director of photography, often don't get along, because they want very different things. Yeah. One of the jobs of the AD is to keep the wheels turning, to make sure you're shooting on time, to make sure everything's on budget. Not so much on budget, but to make sure that we're shooting, that we make sure everything is being done.
You're making your day is what they call it.
You're making your day, and you're making sure that no one's safety is in jeopardy. That's like a big deal, So the AD will not do anything. If the AD thinks something on set is not safe, they'll stop, and we're going to make sure it's safe. A good AD will do that. And that pisses a lot of other people off because they want to get the day done, And so, but you understand safety has to come first. And the DP, often the director of photography, that's the person who really has a big say in the look of the show, how it's going to be shot, just as much as the director. They'll really help out what kind of lenses we're going to be using, how it should be lit, and all that takes setup. And the setup takes usually longer than you have. And so the AD wants to keep either wants to keep the trains rolling or wants to stop the trains from rolling because it's not safe.
Right.
And the DP wants to shoot. They want to make the best, they want to put whatever's best on TV, the best look on TV. Then there's the producer, the line producer, who wants to stay on budget and really doesn't, it's not even so much about safe or, safety I'm sure is very important to them, but it's really more about, we don't want to go over. The DP doesn't really care about going over in budget. That's not coming out of their pocket. The line producer worries about that. And so you have all these different factions, and they're kind of like at odds with each other. And I was very surprised by the first time my partner and I were running a show, because suddenly now we're in the position where we're the ones who have to ultimately say whether we want to go over budget, whether it's good enough, if it's not good enough. Everyone wants to please the showrunner, but at the same time, we have to arbitrate. We have to settle the fights between the AD and the DP, and it's hard to know who's right, and it's hard to know whose side you should be on, especially when you're new, especially when you don't even have, you don't even have the education for a lot of this stuff. So you have to learn on the job. A lot of what I found I had to do the first few years of running a show was learning other people's jobs, just so I could have an educated conversation, so I could be the one who made the decision.
I think that's highlighting something for me here, if I may interject, and that is what you just said are all of the reasons why it's going to be very difficult for a new writer to sell a pilot and be named a showrunner on a show.
And why would you even want to be? Because it's like all this stuff is so hard. You don't even know what you don't know. And you want all this responsibility? Like, what are you thinking? That's just an ego thing. I want to be the boss. Like, dude, you don't want to be the boss. You don't want to be the boss. Trust me.
Yeah, right.
Not yet. I also even thought I kind of even thought showing up on set as a showrunner, everyone would care what I think. Well, most of these union guys don't give a crap about what I think. They're protected by their union. They don't really care. They're not there to make me happy. They're there to make a paycheck. There's no bowing when I come on set. I have a job, and they have a job. I always thought that was kind of funny, especially the Teamsters. The Teamsters particularly don't care. They're the ones who drive the trucks. They really don't care.
But I will say that they're some of the best people to know on set if you are in an assistant level. Because if you need something to get done, those are the guys who are going to help you get it done.
Oh, for sure.
For sure. Get to know them, get to know catering, get to know crafty. And they will help you do your assistant job much better, because you as an assistant do care what the showrunner thinks, and you are paying attention. And in the production office, you definitely care what the showrunner thinks, because you're really serving them to help them make their show.
That's exactly right. You're helping them make the creative vision that they want to make. And all this said, I'm a comedy writer. I became a comedy writer because I didn't want to become I didn't want to go into management. I didn't want to work at a desk, have a desk job. I didn't want to work in the corporate culture. And yet now I'm the boss. And, I want to be the snarky guy at the back of the room, firing jokes, making fun of the guy standing up front, or the woman standing up front. That's what I want. That's what most comedy writers want. And now you're the boss, and you're the grown-up in the room.
You're the guy standing at the front of the room.
Yeah. And you have to be the grown-up. And none of us became comedy writers because we wanted to be grown-ups. And yet now you have this responsibility on you. And, even that's just weird. That's just like, okay, I guess I'm the boss, but I didn't sign. I didn't want to be the boss. I wanted to be the wise ass. Then there's that, we're not really well equipped. That's why some people think, well, why these shows, why are they poorly run, or why are they why do shows go over budget? Why is the writers difficult? It's like, well, because we're writers and we didn't want to become bosses. We're not the right people to be a boss.
I've worked in multiple departments on TV, and I think it's been an education in and of itself, and I'm grateful for that. And it's interesting. I think the people with the strongest opinions about the showrunners are actually the production office coordinators. Because they're the ones who are like, that every decision that the showrunner makes affects that job in the production office, right? We're going to be late today. We're going to shoot through lunch. We're going to hire this person, last minute change in casting. All of that creates work for the production office. We change script, we have alt lines, we have a new version of the script coming out. All of that creates work for the production office. And they're the ones who tend to have the strongest opinions about what a good showrunner is and what a good showrunner isn't.
Interesting. Yeah. The
Right.
production coordinator. Okay. Be nice to the production coordinator. Um, yeah. There's all the, and what I was going to also say is that showrunners, okay, so we make the important creative decisions, or at least if we don't make them, we delegate those decisions, and the person who's making them has to kind of run it by the showrunner. And so the showrunner kind of steers the boat. But even still, the showrunner really isn't, you'd say they're the boss, but we're really never the boss, because it's not our money we're playing with. It's the studio's money. And the studio or the network, they're going to have a say in it. And they're going to give notes that you don't agree with, or they're going to put their foot down on something. And it's their show. I mean, they bought it, they're paying for it. And then there's also other non-writing executive producers who have a strong say. And they may be managers, they may be other people who, help develop the show. And so they have, even though they're not writers, they get a big say in things. And so there's a lot of, it's not so much politics, but there's a lot of making sure people are happy. You don't get to just, I don't get to, you're never the boss. That's my point. You're never really the boss. You always have to, some people are, I guess, but not me.
But you're the middle manager. You're the person who's responsible for doing that. You're in charge of a certain level of people, but then there are people you answer to who answer to other people who answer to other people.
Yeah, yeah. And so, what are you going to do? But so that's why if you really want, some people, I think young writers like, well, my creative vision. It's like, dude, you sold it. You want a paycheck. This is how you play the game. If you want your creative vision, if that's what you really want, write a book and then self-publish it. Because even if you publish with a publisher, they're going to have opinions. They're going to have notes. Like if it's all about your creative vision, then just do what you want to do and self-publish it. Sell it, off your bicycle or whatever.
Right.
That's just the world. I'm sure there are some showrunners and writers and directors who really get to call the shots because they're so big, they've earned it. But most of us are not really at that level. You have to have a hit show to really be able to do that. A big hit show.
Yeah. And those people tend to have multiple shows at a certain point because they've been entrusted, because they've produced enough profitable product that it's worth hedging their bets and putting more eggs in that basket.
Yeah.
While diversifying with their other shows.
And even then, I think even it's not like they get a carte blanche. I think they also have to get, the network or studios to sign off on certain casting decisions, or, they don't get to do, they just have a lot more power than I do, but it's not even 100% for them. They're playing with other people's money. That's just how it goes when you get paid, when you do that. So, right. People need to have a realistic expectation of what the job is, I think.
Yeah. And in film, we would call that final cut, right? Where you get to make the final decisions because you have the full authority to cut whatever you want. Right.
Yeah. In TV, that's always a good way to know who's in charge, who has final cut. We've worked on shows. So the director doesn't have, on TV, the director doesn't have final cut. The showrunner has final cut, but even the showrunner might have, the network may have notes on that cut and the showrunner may have to take them, or you may have a star who's an executive producer on that show and they have essentially final cut. When my partner and I ran Rhett and Link's buddy system, they were the stars of the show and they also sold the show. They were executive producers. So we turned in our final cut to them. And then they would make changes based on that. Sometimes I agreed, sometimes I didn't agree. But the point is, it doesn't really matter. I'm not going to fight them. They have final cut. That's the end of that. So
this was a big deal, about the time that our bosses on Tacoma FD, Kevin and Steven, the Broken Lizard guys, Paul Soder, Jay, Eric, they've crowdfunded and they got funding to do their own show. And that was taking an existing independent project that they had and making a new version of that. And it's like, okay, there's no problem here because you have independent filmmakers who are making their project and they've already done this multiple times. This is what they did, is they made indie films. But then there was a bunch of drama about Zach Braff making his film, which I think was Wish You Were Here, and he crowdfunded it. And the drama that came out of that was he had people interested in buying it, but they didn't want to give him final cut. And so he said, well, screw you, I'm going to go crowdfund it so I can have final cut. And the drama was, well, people are saying you haven't earned the right to do that, so now you're going to take your audience's money to satisfy your ego of Final Cut. And that was like a big thing that they talked about. I'm not saying I agree with those opinions, but that
Who
was a
did
big deal.
who did they want to have final cut on that project? If it not him, if he was the director.
I'm assuming they wanted to have Final Cut, right? Because they can hold Final Cut away from the director, where they still have the right to do that. I think my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that most directors in films still don't get Final Cut. That the studio is still going to make decisions because it's their product, and that's famously why Blade Runner has like 5 different editions.
And that's why, that's why you offer the director's cut versus the the studio cut.
One of my favorite versions is favorite stories is Donnie Darko. I love that film, but I do not like the theatrical cut. I love the director's cut because it allowed me to get the full story. Right. So he didn't have J. Richard Kelly, I think his name, Richard Kelly. He didn't have Final Cut. The studio did, and then ultimately he got to make his version of it.
Yeah, and the more money, the more expensive something is, the more interference you're going to have. Period. And that's why my partner and I always talk about we like running low budget stuff because you get less interference. They know to back off. So so it's that's the trade off. Basically, though, the analogy I use for being a show, like the main job of a showrunner is to break the stories, to figure out what stories are going to be told and how to tell them. And so it's like most of it, the really important heavy lifting is writing. And the way I liken it is basically air traffic control. It's like you have a certain amount of time to get these scripts written, then you have to shoot them. And it takes longer to write them than it does to shoot them. And so you're running out of time fast. So it's really about like throwing up these planes, get every plane up the runway as fast as you can, even if they're not safe, even if they can barely fly, get them up, put as much gas as you can them. And in the first one that looks like it's going to crash, get that one landed first. You shoot that one first. And then you look at the next one, which one's wobbling, how much longer can it stay in the air? Let's fix that one real fast and then get that safely onto the ground. And it's, because the planes are coming down. And so even when my partner and I run shows, like to me, the biggest knot in my stomach is the story breaking process. We have to get all those stories broken. And then once they're broken, I can relax a little bit because the breaking is the hardest part of the whole thing. Yeah. And so it's like get those planes down safely.
Yeah. Right. Landing is landing. Who cares?
Yeah. Right.
I was talking to the producer of Tacoma FD, and she said she was shocked at how fast Kevin and Steve write their episodes. Right. Because it's a quick turnaround for 13 episodes of television. She was very surprised. Like our first week we came in, we broke 2 stories in the first week.
Yeah, we broke them, but they're not broken.
They're not done, right? We still like you said, it's off there. They're in the air. We're gonna come back and catch them. Maybe do a mid-air refueling, and then hope to land them by the time we have to shoot it.
Yeah. There's not a lot of. It's not luxurious. It's not a. It's not a. Yeah. It's not. It's someone even a lot of people ask me these like, what do you do when you have writer's block? It's like, dude, writer's block? Are you out of your mind? Like we have to shoot these things. Like I can't tell the studio I'm blocked this week. I'll be fired.
We have a great podcast about writer's block and how it's just ego. And so if you haven't listened to that episode, go back and find it wherever you listen to podcasts or on the YouTube channel.
Go listen to that one.
It's just your ego. Like you don't no time for it, and it's not the job of a professional. They don't have the luxury of writer's block.
Yeah, you fall back on story structure, which is that's the big thing that we teach in the writer's course. Is like how do you fall back on that so you don't have to worry about being blocked. Right. But another thing that I learned early on running shows is to empower people to do their job, because there are some showrunners that don't micromanage everything, and those guys work, or women, they work their hours are really hard. Like I'd rather not. I'd rather empower people so I can go home a little earlier, and that's what my partner and I would do on I think we did on Marin pretty well. Like we would. Like I mean, we had a costume designer, and she, ultimately all those decisions are ours. Every piece of wardrobe is our decision. She would, hold up, this or this or this or this, and then eventually we're like, well, what do you think? And then and she'd look at like, what do you mean? What do I think?
No one has ever asked me that.
No one's ever bothered to ask, right?
Yeah.
So you ask her, well, what do you think? And she's like, well, and then she'll come up with like a really long, elaborate backstory for why this plaid shirt was better than that plaid shirt. And I'd say, well, it sounds like you put a lot of thought into this. even if I don't even agree with you, even if I think your thought process is ridiculously long, let's go with your way. You've thought harder on it than I have. So, let's do your way.
Yeah, I think we might have
And,
talked about this on another podcast, but some friends of mine went to the Colorado Film School before it became defunct, and then they went to Santa Fe University of Art and Design, where I went. I met up with them, and we were all roommates out here in LA, and they were telling us that one of their courses on producing was talking about like an ashtray, and it was like a 3-hour lecture on why writing an ashtray into your script, like the ramifications of that down the line of the props guy has to go source 3 to 5 of them to show you so that you make a decision about that, and then that affects what the buyer is doing, which affects like this whole crazy line of things that happen just from writing blue ashtray as a scene
it's even worse than that. When we were on King of the Hill, because everything is on camera, has to be drawn, has to be put there. Even every sound, every bird chirping has to be put there because it's animation. It's not there. And so we would have to go over designs. So if you write I remember very early on, because I was new to animation, I was sitting with a showrunner and he was looking over designs. You get a folder of these things and you have to go through on any given day, maybe 50 designs, and you're basically rubber stamping, because you might, and he got stuck on the salsa, because you have to approve what the salsa looks like. The salsa is going to be on a prop that's going to be on a table, the kitchen table. You're not even going to reference it, but it's going to be there because they're eating chips. And he looked at the salsa and he goes, "Does this salsa look spicy enough to you?" I thought he was joking, right? I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, should there be more flecks of pepper?" And I'm like, "I don't know." And so he left a note, spicier, and he sent it back to the animators to work on it again. Like, that's a lot of decisions, man. I was like, damn, we got decisions to make here.
Yeah. Ooh.
Whether it looks spicy enough. Hi guys, it's Michael Jamin. I wanted to take a break from talking and talk just a little bit more. I think a lot of you people are getting bad advice on the internet. Many of you want to break into the industry as writers or directors or actors, and some of you are paying for this advice on the internet. It's just bad. And as a working TV writer and showrunner, this burns my butt. So my goal is to flush a lot of this bad stuff out of your head and replace it with stuff that's actually going to help you. So I post daily tips on social media. Go follow me at Michael Jamin Writer. You can find me on Instagram, and Facebook, and TikTok. And let's be honest, if you don't have time, like just 2 minutes a day towards improving your craft, it's not going to happen. So go make it happen for you at Michael Jamin Writer. Okay, now back to my previous rant.
And then I asked the question, like, when is good enough, and when is perfection the enemy of good enough, right? Because good is the enemy of great. Like, you need to be great, but
there was a lot of that going on there. There was a lot of, I thought, doing unnecessary work. But hey, but like I said, animation, every design had to be approved. And so if a character was, wearing, cut off jeans, well, how high are the cutoff? They'd show you 3 different designs. You have to approve. No, the cutoff should be more frayed. I mean, it was literally that kind of control. And ultimately all that comes down to the showrunner, and whether or not sometimes the showrunner would delegate stuff like that to the writer of the episode so that they could empower the writer to make those decisions. And so the showrunner wasn't bothered making basically inane decisions like that all day. And then the other responsibilities of basically running a show are so you have a show is divided into pre-production, production, and post-production.
Right.
And so pre-production is the calm before the storm. It's when most of the writing is done, or at least a lot of the writing is done. You break the stories, you figure out what they are, the act break moments, you get some notes. The studio or the network will give you notes. You have to do rewrites on it. And then usually you go to the table, you go to rehearsal. And it's run, every show's a little different, but at the table read, when the actors sit around and read it for the first time, that's when an episode could tank or it could do fine. But either way, you're probably going to do some rewriting on that. And then there's production time. That's the time actually spent shooting it. Hopefully you're done writing in production, but that's definitely not always the case. And commonly it's not the case. And so during that production time, the showrunner will be usually on set. If they're not on set, they'll send a proxy. Either the writer of that episode or a high-ranking writer will be there, and that person is they're on set to make sure that we're getting the stuff doesn't fall apart. Like this, if there's a line that doesn't work, you can rewrite it there, or make sure we have the shots that we need, because the director, ultimately that's the director's job, but it's the showrunner standing there in front of the monitors, what we call video village, where these two or three monitors, however many monitors, you're sitting there and you're watching the action. And usually the director will ask you, are you good, before you move on to the next scene.
Mm-hmm.
And if the showrunner's not happy with the performance or not happy with the camera coverage, you say, no, I'm not good. We got to pick this up, you know? And so you have to be able to understand, you have to be able to look at the cameras in such a way to know that if you have what you need versus not. And it's very easy to be fooled into thinking that you have what you need. And then you go into editing, you go, no, we didn't get it. So you have to pay attention. That's the hard part of the job.
I was going to say, I've worked in all three of these: production, pre-production, post-production, production, and post-production now, just as an assistant. And it's shocking to me. There are a lot of people in production who have a kind of a bad taste in their mouth about writers, because they're like, writers are so lazy. They start their day at 10, they leave at 6, like, 8 hours. We're on set for 14, whatever. They just have these opinions about them. And then, now sitting in the writer's room on season 4 of Tacoma FD, I'm like, yeah, but these guys all went home and thought about this, and they put in hours just passively or actively thinking about what they're going to talk about tomorrow, and then come into the room prepared to talk about that to keep the ball moving. Then on the flip side of that, like, production is brutal. And
production is brutal.
You have made that observation to me as well. And, I've done it several times, several shows, a couple seasons of a couple shows, but the most eye-opening portion of this for me was as the producer's assistant on the Broken Lizard film Quasi that's coming out. It was 45-minute drive to set. I didn't get paid for that. I had to get up and I had to get there. I had to get there an hour before call, meaning an hour before people are expected to show up. I had to be there because I had to prep things for the producer who was on his way in. Then I was there the entire time he was. And then I would make sure he was okay after, and then he would leave, and then I would wrap up my things, and then I would drive 45 minutes back. Yeah. So it ended up being 14 to 16 hours a day of my life for 6 weeks up at this ranch covered in dirt, doing this job in a trailer or sitting in my car working if he was in the trailer on calls. And that is tough. And the entire time he's sitting in Video Village, he's watching, he's going out to when he catches things, he's having conversations. And that producer job as a creative producer is the job of the showrunner, from what I saw. Like, you're the director, you get to get what you want, but ultimately you still have to get what I want, because I'm responsible to the people with the money to make sure that this was done right.
That's exactly right. And people say to me, well, does the writer get to be on set? And I'm like, do we get to be on set? Like, we have to be on set. It's like, I don't particularly like being on set. It's not comfortable. Like you're saying, you might be shooting on a dusty old ranch. You might be Marin. We were shooting in a crack house. It's not fun spending time in a crack house. It's gross. It's brutal. It's hard work. If you want to go into production, be prepared to work hard. So, So it's not a get. It's more like, well, I have to be there because that's part of my job responsibility.
Right.
And then there's post-production, which is editing. First, starting with editing, the editor makes a cut. They give the cut to the director. The director will take a cut, which will take several days at least. Then the director will submit their cut to the showrunner, and the showrunner may have to recut the whole thing from scratch. I mean, that has happened before, and it's not. It's because this cut is not working. It's not because it's just not cut right. And you could tell when you're watching it, this is not right. So, there's a lot of work with that. Then there's music spotting, which is...
Can we go back to the cut for a second?
Yeah.
I was going to ask, to me, the naive question that comes to my mind as a young writer is, but you wrote it. If you wrote a good script, why is the cut so difficult? Why wouldn't you just copy the script?
Because it's shot, how it's covered. And, you can play a scene, you can cut to a moment and you can cut to a wide shot and take the tension out of the scene. Whereas if you stay on singles, on close-ups, or maybe a reaction shot there, it would totally amp the scene, the tension of the scene. And so, and the pacing of it, if there's too much dead air, if the actor is taking too much time, you can, if it's cut correctly, you can take those a half second there or less, a fraction of a second away, and totally speed it up and totally, you could change the tone. When we were on Marin, we did this one scene which was in a hospital room where Mark was consoling his dying agent in a hospital room, and it played the first cut. It was like, dude, this is really dramatic, and we're trying to do a comedy here. It was really dramatic and not fun. And then I took a pass on it, and it almost turned into a farce because we had all these reaction shots and we paced it up, and it was. I remember showing it to my wife. She goes, "Wow!" She was shocked how different you can make a scene. It's all the same footage. You're just cutting it differently.
Same script, same dialogue, same actors, same coverage. Just the cut and the timing of the cuts changes everything.
Yeah, and I turned that cut into Mark Maron, and he goes, he liked it better, but he goes, it's a little too wacky. He wanted to pull it back a little bit because he thought I went a little too far in that direction, which that's fine. It's but you can really, it just goes to show you how far you can take a cut, and if you don't have the right footage, if you're not on set and you don't know what footage you want or what you need. On Marin, it was such a fast show, we wouldn't really get extra coverage. So if we wanted something, we had to make sure to ask for it, because and sacrifice something.
I'm shocked, by the way, how fast you shot Marin.
2.5 days each.
2.5 days to shoot 24 page script.
I don't know how many pages it was, but it was 22 minutes. Yeah.
Right. So 22 minutes of footage out of 2.5 days.
It was ridiculously fast.
As opposed to Tacoma FD, which is like 4.5, 5 days, which people are shocked about that, as opposed to, a drama, we might get 8 days.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's crazy fast.
But that's what was such an interesting experience about it, was that there was nothing extra, and it really taught me to pay attention, because if you don't get it, you're not going to have it. There was most shows you overshoot it so that you have it, so you're safe. But this taught, because the budget was so small, it really taught me what was necessary and how to look for what was necessary to get the absolute minimum, not waste it. Even now that shows have been shot on video as opposed to film, I was talking to an editor friend of mine. He's like, there's so much wasted stuff because film is expensive. Video is cheap. So you might as well just bang it. Keep the cameras rolling. Let's just waste it. Let's get it all. But back in the days in film, you wouldn't waste that kind of film. So you'd be much more judicious over what you needed. And so I guess my thinking is more like back when it was on film. You wouldn't waste it. You get what you need and then move on.
Yeah. When I was in film school, you gave me a really important note, which I might have talked about in an early episode. So for our avid fans, I apologize if this is redundant. But you said, I was telling you I was in a directing class. You're like, make sure you get people entering and exiting.
Mm-hmm.
Like
clean.
Always.
A clean single, that is, as opposed to picking it up in the master.
Yeah.
Because if you see people entering the wide, then you can't edit around that. But if you pick them up on a clean single, you can take deep cuts, and that's something I learned. I think from Pam Fryman, who was the director on Just Shoot Me. She's one of the most successful directors in multi-camera shows for sure on TV. Pam, she's a wonderful, lovely woman. I remember standing next to her on Just Shoot Me. I'm like, tell me everything you know.
Yeah.
How do you frame it? How do you know where to frame? How do you know when you have something? How do you know when you miss something? And she was an interesting one because she learned, I believe she learned on soap operas where you're shooting so fast, the pace is so fast, you better pay attention to make sure, because you have to go fast. So, there's a lot of stuff that I picked up from working on the job and talking to people.
Yeah. It was very helpful. I mean, it helped me get out of some sticky situations and my own cuts and my own, student projects. So there's a freebie for everyone listening who wants to be a director.
Yeah, we throw in some directing advice every now and then. And I guess the last thing I'll say, and then we will move on, but in post-production, the last thing you do is the mix session where you go. The show's been scored. All the sound effects have been put in.
Right, and so real fast, scoring. What is that? Spotting? Is that what that's called?
Yeah, that's when you put music, and that's where you decide where you're going to want to put music. Whether or not you keep it there is a different. You decide that at the mix often. So you talk to the composer. We need some music over here, and then spotting session. We need music here. Come up with a cue here. It should be fast. It should be this cue should be scary. This cue should be slow. And the music supervisor will either find a cue or hire, or we'll have the composer write one.
Okay.
you know?
And this is a question for me that I've always wondered, because we learned all this in film school. It didn't really, I didn't pay attention to it because like I just want to be a writer. It's like me
Yeah.
not paying attention and how to be a PA was actually one of the biggest disservices to my ability to be on set, because although I understood how to use a walkie, I wasn't quite sure about how to do these other things, and I just thought, I just want to be a writer. I don't care about
Right.
that. I really wish I would have like taken in this knowledge, and so music is one of those things. I have friends that are composers, and these are questions I asked them because I was always the kid in my family who did not try to have a music talent. That's math. It's boring to me. I don't
Right.
care. I'd rather be writing than do that. And everyone else in my family play the guitar and the piano, and they're very musically inclined, and I'm not. And I feel like that's a disservice to me today, because so much of what we see in film and television is sound design and music. It
Right.
has so much weight. So I was going to ask, do you feel like that's an important skill set for writers to develop? Is assuming we're going to have a career where we end up as a showrunner or making some of those decisions, do you feel like we should be focusing on music?
No, I think that's a matter of taste, and so I leave that. The way it is a matter of taste. Sievert and I, we always prefer less music to more. I
Mm.
feel like, especially if you watch like movies, like there's not too many comedy movies anymore, but in my opinion, they're all overscored. Way too much music. Do do do. Someone sneaking into a house. Do ba do ba do ba do ba do. Like it's insulting to me. They always feel
Got
like they have to tell you how to feel. Um,
it. Mm.
but if you look at movies from even like the 70s or even in the 80s, there was much less music. And to me, it makes it feel smarter that you should use your music judiciously when you really want it. If you
Less is
score the
more.
whole damn thing, yeah, it's just like it becomes terrible. That's
My,
just
my,
my opinion.
yeah, my buddy Ken, who's a composer, um, he always talks about how he'll watch movies, and then like in the middle of someone talking, there's just like an oboe going brrr, like right over the top of him. It's like you
Uh
can't even
huh.
hear the people talking, and it's just some
Yeah.
composer who's just slapping music and riffing on what they think they need.
Yeah, but the director or the showrunner left it in, and maybe the studio wanted it to be. So you don't know who's making
Right.
that call. So it's just that we usually fight to pull music out
Got it.
as opposed to put it in.
Got
But
it.
that's just our taste.
But and then
But
moving on to the mix, right?
then you go to the mix, which is you go to the big studio. They have the big mixing board, and you're watching it on a giant screen, and that's always interesting because, like the first time I went to a mix, I think was on King of the Hill, and so you're literally it's animated, right? So everything is there. Every sound has to be put in. So I remember even watching an early cut, or it was a late cut actually, and you're watching it, and there's a lot of I was like, why are there so many birds? Like, what's going on? It's because you have to put the birds in, but someone put a lot of birds in. It sounded like we were in an aviary, and I told the guy, hey, can we pull some of these birds out? Oh yeah, yeah, and you just pull out half the birds, and okay, that
Mm.
sounds better. And the whole time you're listening on the bigs, which are the big speakers. So you have these big, gigantic, amazing speakers that sound like fantastic, right? And you're listening to on the bigs to really pick up the nuances of these birds. And then you say, okay, you get the level just right to you're happy to have the number of birds. And then you'd watch it on the little, so the small speakers, or maybe you'd watch it at home on your phone, and you're not hearing any birds. Or even if you have a TV, or maybe your TV is not that good, you're not hearing any of the birds because it's just not your speakers aren't good enough.
The,
But
Go ahead.
some people have great speakers, so you have to prepare for the people who have great speakers.
I just saw a TikTok this morning where this guy was talking about, he's like a sound engineer, and he's like, I was working with a very popular pop band recently,
Hmm.
and they, you do the car test. So we mastered it. He went out, he put it in his brand new Rolls Royce, put the CD in, and it's like, this sounds incredible. And then I took it, I went into my 2002 Honda Civic, and I put it in, and it sounded awful. And so
Yeah.
then he went back and said, you need to listen to this. And it was so bad, they ended up hooking up the everything and mastered it in his 2002 Honda to make sure that it sounded good for everyday people, because
Yeah.
they're just different.
Yeah. And that does make it hard. It does make it hard to you know, so be kind to us if we don't get the mix right.
Right.
But there you go. That's basically the job of a showrunner.
Wow.
Or
But
maybe there's more.
I think it's a very important, um, eye-opening podcast for people, especially those of us who have desires to kind of reach that pinnacle of success in TV writing and have our
Yeah.
own shows and run our own shows. And it's like, there is a level of egomania, I would think, that involves with wanting to do that job. At the same time, I think for me, it's really, how far can I push myself to be a master of the craft? And hopefully, to me, that's a benchmark to say you're doing a good enough job at this that you're entrusted to make those decisions.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you, Michael.
Thank you. And so, one last thing, Phil, we should make sure people know about our watch list.
Yeah.
I want to make sure we bring that up.
Yeah. Watch list is a cool thing. It's a once a week newsletter. It goes out every Friday. You sign up today, it'll come out Friday. And basically it's the top 3 videos that you've hand selected for people. It's basically weekly inspiration. They can unsubscribe anytime. We don't use it for any other purpose. It's just simply 1 email a week.
Yeah. So go sign up at michaeljamin.com watch list, or, continue following me on social media, because we post every day, Phil.
Yeah.
Multiple times. Every day.
Lots of stuff.
Multiple. Yeah. You more than me for sure. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. Until next time.
This has been an episode of Screenwriters Need to Hear This with Michael Jamin and Phil Hudson. If you'd like to support this podcast, please consider subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing this podcast with someone who needs to hear today's subject. For free daily screenwriting tips, follow Michael on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Michael Jamin Writer. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Phil A. Hudson. This episode was produced by Phil Hudson and edited by Dallas Crane. Until next time, keep writing.